As the Civil War raged on, Abraham Lincoln issued a preliminary decree on September 22, 1862, declaring that enslaved people in the rebellious Confederate states were legally free. Now, this meant that not all enslaved people would be freed. Only those in the rebellious states like Alabama, Arkansas, Florida, Georgia, Louisiana, not all parishes in Louisiana, Mississippi, North Carolina, South Carolina, etc. This decree, the Emancipation Proclamation, would not take effect until the stroke of midnight. Also known as Freedom's Eve, the most basic explanation is that Watch Night marks when African Americans across the country watched and waited for the Emancipation Proclamation to take effect. Enslaved blacks in these areas gathered and waited on December 31st, 1862, to see what would happen on the 1st. Those gathering on the first watch night included many African Americans who were still legally enslaved as they assembled, sometimes in secrecy, essentially watching for their freedom to take effect at midnight, marking the start of the tradition as a celebration of liberty from slavery. During the first watch night, many enslaved African Americans gathered to pray, worship, sing, and dance. Now, this might not seem much to us today, but you have to remember that at that time, enslaved black people couldn't find much of a break from the ever-present surveillance of the slave master, even in practicing their faith. White enslavers feared that religion, or rather spirituality in general, could incite rebellions if practiced without observance. They wrote laws that restricted worship in large gatherings, such as what was written in the 1848 Georgia Slave Code, which read, "No person of color shall be allowed to preach or exhort or join in any religious exercise with any persons of color, either free or slave, there being more than 7 persons of color present," end quote. Despite these laws, enslaved people sought to exercise their own spiritual customs and faith practices reflective of the homes from which they were stolen. They convened at praise houses, on plantations, or secretly gathered in the woods where they practiced their faith under the protective cover of the trees and the bush in what became known as quote-unquote hush harbors, or secret meeting places for enslaved African Americans to practice their faith and preserve their cultural traditions. By creating hidden gathering spots where we could worship freely and express our cultural identities, we asserted our own autonomy and humanity.